Fujifilm GFX is the first medium format camera I ever had the chance to test. Using it reminded me of the excitement I felt and the high expectations I had when I bought my first full-frame DSLR or when I used the Leica M for the first time. So, how was my experience with this unique camera in Fujifilm's arsenal? Let's take a look. Well, no surprises here. The GFX is a camera that you want to buy for its image quality. Nothing more, nothing less. It features a 44 by 33mm CMOS sensor with 51.4 megapixel. The 50s chip is similar to those of other medium format brands such as Hasselblad, Pentax and Phase 1, although Fujifilm states that they have tweaked it according to their own specifications. The sensor is 1.7 times bigger than the 35mm format, but smaller than the 54 by 40mm sensors used by high-end medium format cameras such as the Hasselblad H6D100C or Phase 1 XF100MP, whose sensors are closer to the popular 120mm film format. The crop factor in comparison to 35mm format is approximately 0.8. The sensor has a native 4/3 aspect ratio, but there is the possibility to crop the image into different formats in camera if you rather not crop in post-production. So what can you expect from such a large sensor? Well, first of all, lots of sharpness. The GFX delivers a stunning level of detail thanks to the high megapixel count, lack of anti-aliasing filter, and optical quality of the GF lenses. I had the chance to test 3 primes and they all deliver outstanding performance from corner to corner. Another strong point is dynamic range. You can easily recover 4 stops in the shadows without losing too much detail or needing to apply lots of noise reduction. The camera records 14-bit RAW with uncompressed or lossless compressed options. Highlight recovery is good, but gets even better if you take advantage of the DR setting. By recording at a higher sensitivity than the base 100 and overexposing your image by 1 or 2 stops to give more light to the shadows, you end up with a RAW file that remains very flexible in the dark zones while giving you more details in the bright areas. And if that weren't enough, you also have the option of exposure bracketing up to 9 frames with a range of ±3 EV to create stunning HDR results. The performance at high sensitivities was another pleasant surprise. It has a normal range of 100 to 12800 ISO, and up to 3200 noise is quite contained and doesn't require much reduction. From 6400 you start to see more noise, and past the normal range the image becomes unusable. The straight-out-of-camera JPEGs work really well with the noise reduction set between -4 and -2. Then we have the color profiles, which has always been a strong point of Fujifilm cameras. You encounter the same film simulation modes available on the APS-C series such as Provia, Astia, Proneg and so on. My favorite is Classic Chrome because it has a more distinctive color palette. By default it lacks some saturation and has lots of contrast, but with a few adjustments in camera you can achieve really nice results. With such a beast of a camera you might wonder why anyone would bother with in-camera JPEGs when you can work with such wonderful RAW files. Well, if you use software programs such as Lightroom, you can reapply the film simulation modes to your image in post-production. Otherwise, you'll have to work with the profile available in the specific software you use. Either way, there is plenty of color information to grade your image to your taste. If you really like the Fujifilm color palette you selected in camera, you can use the built-in RAW processor, which allows you to save an 8-bit TIFF version of your image in addition to a JPEG file. There is also the Fujifilm X-RAW Studio that gives you the same results because it works with the camera processor. There are lots of settings to adjust the results in camera. One you won't find in the APS-C series is called Chrome Effect, which gives an extra boost in saturation and is inspired by the reversal film called Fortia. However, when the setting is enabled, the camera takes more time to process the shot, so it's best to use it with the RAW converter. The only thing I don't like about this camera is how the colors are reproduced under artificial light sources. It easily shifts towards a green tint, which is the same thing I noticed on many Fuji APS-C cameras. With the RAW file, it can easily be adjusted, while with the in-camera profiles, you need to tweak the white balance shift setting. Skin tones are another point in favor of the GFX. It has a natural rendering that is full of detail and subtle tone transitions without any strong tint dominance. Last but not least, the black and white profiles are great. You'll find the popular Acros mode that gives more contrast to the images than the regular monochrome. Like the X series, the design of the GFX is very practical. The camera is comfortable to hold thanks to the large front grip, but isn't lightweight by any means, especially with certain lenses such as the 23mm or 110mm. However, it feels very solid and is fully waterproof. There are many dials to control the exposure, including one for the ISO and shutter speed. I only wish that the latter were closer to the grip so that I could reach it with my fingers more easily while composing with the viewfinder. You won't find an exposure compensation dial, but there is a small monochrome LCD screen that displays useful settings and the remaining battery life. It's very handy and can be backlit and customized. The viewfinder offers great resolution and a large magnification. It's crisp, bright and very nice to use, although it will display noise in low light if you deactivate the exposure preview. The EVF can be removed or used with the optional tilt adapter. On the rear you will find a small AF joystick and an LCD screen that can be tilted on 3 axes, just like those of the X-T2 and X-H1. The monitor is touch sensitive and can be used to move the focus point, focus or change settings in the quick menu. When selecting a focus area, however, the screen isn't as reactive as it could be. The menu system and quick menu are identical to those found on the X series. They are intuitive, well organized and provide a good amount of customization. You also find 10 function buttons distributed around the body. All the buttons are very well placed with the exception of the focus mode selector, which is located near the viewfinder. It would be more comfortable to use were it on the front of the camera instead. The GFX has 2 SD card slots with UHS-2 compatibility. You also find a full-size USB 3 port, micro HDMI, DC power, microphone input, headphone output and a flash sync socket. The GFX has a contrast detection system with 117 points that can be subdivided into 425 points in certain shooting modes. This can be really helpful if you want to pinpoint the focus. Overall, the performance was better than I had expected. In good light, it does a very good job, and while the locking speed isn't the fastest I've come across, It is accurate most of the time as long as you select the right focus point size. In low light, I experienced a decrease in locking speed, but rarely did the camera miss focus or fail to focus entirely. You can force the camera to focus faster by activating the rapid AF setting, which is effective. With the latter, the LCD or EVF drops in resolution while the camera focuses, but it's hardly an issue. The only problem is in backlit situations, where the camera can focus on the background rather than the point you selected, or simply fail to lock. Also keep in mind that some lenses like the GF 63mm are slower because they lack a linear motor design. There are other area modes you can select such as Zone AF and wide tracking, but the 425 point grid is not available, and I find the single point more effective with this camera anyway. The GFX does what it can in continuous autofocus, but don't expect great results. There's face and eye detection, but once again I prefer to use the single point and vary its size. The maximum burst speed is 3 frames per second, and the buffer is good if you use JPEGs. So overall, the camera doesn't impress when it comes to speed and autofocus, but I don't think it's fair to highlight this as a negative point. After all, the GFX isn't a sports camera, and all things considered, it does perform well enough for the genres it's meant to be used for. The GFX can record video in Full HD, but the quality isn't great. There's visible aliasing and moire, and there aren't a lot of settings to satisfy serious video makers. But here again, it's not designed for this purpose. In a way, it's a shame because there is definitely the potential to produce great looking footage and colors from such a large sensor. Hopefully Fujifilm will manage to implement a more powerful processor on the next generation to improve this aspect. Amongst other things worth mentioning, we have the electronic first curtain and fully electronic shutters. The former can be useful at slow shutter speeds to minimize shutter shock, although I have to say that I haven't come across any with the full mechanical shutter. In fact, I find the GFX an easy camera to use handheld, as long as you use a reasonably safe shutter speed. The electronic shutter allows you to bypass the 1/4000th of a second maximum speed and bring it up to 1/60,000th of a second. Contrary to other medium format systems such as the Hasselblad X1D, the GFX uses a focal plane shutter rather than a leaf shutter. This means that if you want to take advantage of high-speed sync with flash, you need to use products that include the HSS features, which are definitely more common on today's market. You can use tethering with either USB or Wi-Fi, and there are a few software programs and plugins available, including the Fujifilm X Acquire app. The battery is large and has a more than decent endurance. It can get you through an entire day of shooting if you turn the camera off when it isn't being used. As mentioned before, the GF lenses, or at least the ones I had the chance to try, provide stunning optical quality. Sharpness is impressive from the fastest aperture, and distortion and aberrations are both very well contained. A few suffer from flare more easily, but other than that, it's hard to find a serious weak point. There is something worth mentioning, however, and that is depth of field. By default, when you think about a large sensor, you expect more shallow depth of field. However, for that to be true, you also need a fast aperture, and so far the native lenses available for the system are not fast enough to make a relevant difference. For example, take a look at these two images. One was taken with the X-T2 and XF35mm at 1.4, and the other with the GFX and 63mm at f2.8. Both lenses give you approximately the same field of view, but the faster aperture of the APS-C lens allows the X-T2 image to have a very similar depth of field to the GFX picture, despite the big difference in sensor size. Of course, this may change in the future if Fujifilm releases faster lenses, and there is also the option of adapting third-party products. Just to be clear, I don't necessarily mean this as a negative point, because shallow depth of field isn't everything, and the quality of the bokeh is also related to the quality of the lenses themselves. And at the risk of repeating myself, the GFX certainly has the advantage of sharpness. The quality of its lenses wide open is way better than most APS-C lenses, and I would say even several 35mm format lenses. Out of the three I tested, the 110mm f2 is probably my favorite. The optical performance is outstanding, and it certainly renders that medium format look you would expect from such a camera system. The Fujifilm GFX delivers the best image quality I've seen from a mirrorless camera so far, which is the main reason you may want to invest in one. It's comfortable and easy to use, and the fact that it doesn't shine when it comes to autofocus or video matters less because it hasn't been designed for these purposes. I also found it interesting that Fujifilm decided to invest in a medium format system rather than a 35mm system. Not only is it a bigger step up from the APS-C series, but it also brings something different to the market. If you ask me if I would ever buy one, my answer would likely be no, not because I don't like it, but simply because I wouldn't be able to take advantage of the quality often enough to justify the investment. But I can fully understand why other photographers would consider it. It's a niche product for sure, but for those who know how to make the most of its characteristics, there's no doubt that it's a wonderful photography tool to use.